There are tapes, and then there are the ones we're told never existed. The kind of footage that doesn't get filed, archived, or released, not because of legal restrictions, but because no one can explain what's on them, because they don't follow rules, they don't obey time, because they watch you back. This isn't a story about a haunted place or a forgotten room in a forgotten building. This is about a single tape, recovered by accident, a degraded VHS reel, buried beneath concrete and dust, in the basement of a facility that officially never existed. And the moment it was played, things changed. For the people who found it, for the people who heard what was recorded, and maybe for you, because even watching a piece of it, even hearing fragments of the audio, has had an effect. Reports of interference, hallucinations, strange voices through speakers that were turned off. People claimed it was just folklore, internet paranoia, until people started disappearing. Over the next hour, we will walk through the events surrounding what has come to be known in underground forums as the observation tape. You will hear the story of the team who found it, the strange clues left behind, and the final footage that never aired. What you're about to hear has never been fully released to the public. It has been reconstructed from field recordings, security logs, and pieces of corrupted media, salvaged by archivists who frankly wish they hadn't. This is a case that stretches over 2 decades, one that connects a research program buried under government contracts, to a string of modern disappearances, to a growing theory that the tape itself is not only recording, but creating whatever it is still out there. And if you believe the rumors, the still recording, you don't have to believe it. Many don't, but the footage, well, the footage speaks in ways that words can't, in ways you'll understand later. Our story begins in autumn 2013. The Eldon Hill Research Facility sits 30 miles west of Highway 217, deep in a stretch of pine forest, where radio signals drop out and even birds seem to keep their distance. Officially, the compound was decommissioned in 1999, after a fire reportedly damaged key areas of the infrastructure. No one looked too closely. No investigations were launched, and for over a decade, it sat undisturbed, or so it was believed. The compound's outer structures were overgrown. Vines split through brick. Metal staircases rusted until they curled, and entire hallways had collapsed in on themselves. But the basement level, the substructure, remained oddly preserved, locked behind a rusted steel door that hadn't been opened in 14 years. What was being researched there wasn't entirely clear. The few internal documents that have surfaced mention behavioral conditioning, audio isolation, neural mapping, but there are no names attached, no patient records, no published findings. When a maintenance team, contracted by the county, was sent in to stabilize the old tunnels in 2013, they weren't expecting to find anything of value. Most of the equipment had been stripped. No electricity, no ventilation, just a long concrete corridor that led to one final room. At the end of it sat a metal desk, a flickering monitor, somehow still powered through a backup battery, and a heavy plastic evidence bag. Inside that bag was a single VHS tape. The label on the tape had degraded, most of it smudged beyond recognition, except for one line, still visible under the faded ink. OBS Room B, Night 9. There was no context, no date, no identifying number, but something about the handwriting, jagged, uneven, written with pressure, unsettled the technician who found it. According to his initial report, He thought it had been scrawled in haste or fear. He sealed it back in the bag and logged it under temporary inventory. 3 days later, he went back to the site alone, without permission, without notifying anyone. Security footage at the entrance showed him entering with a portable TV and an old tape player. He never signed out. The footage cuts out an hour later. When a new crew arrived the following week, they found his van, still parked out front. But he was gone. They searched for weeks. Drones were flown into collapsed shafts. Cadaver dogs brought in. Every file, every room, every journal fragment was reviewed. Nothing, except for one change. That same VHS tape had been removed from evidence and was now sitting inside the VCR unit, in the desk monitor, as if someone had come back to watch it again. But here's the thing, that TV hadn't worked before. The monitor was dead when it was first found, completely unsalvageable. Cracked screen, corroded wires, but when they powered it on, it displayed a frozen image, perfectly still, in grainy black and white. A room, one chair, one bed, a figure, seated at the edge of the frame, unmoving, with eyes locked directly into the camera. The timestamp in the lower corner read, midnight. The time never advanced. That's when the footage was pulled and sealed. Private agency, with ties to government records, arrived within 48 hours. They confiscated the tape, deleted all internal logs, and the Eldon Hill facility was reclassified under restricted territory. No further entry allowed, no reason given. But something strange began to happen. Weeks later, footage of that very tape began appearing on message boards, low-resolution clips with distorted audio, uploaded anonymously, always taken down within minutes. Yet people saved it, passed it around, copied it, shared it, until it began to spread. Some believed it was a hoax, others a psychological experiment. But those who watched more than a few seconds reported something else. A presence, a feeling, as if something was just outside the camera's field of view, as if the recording wasn't finished yet. It always starts with curiosity, but the people who found the tape weren't thrill seekers. They weren't looking for fame. Each of them had a reason, a weight, something unfinished pulling them toward that place. There were 3 of them, 3 stories intertwined by circumstance, and something older than any of them could have imagined. Mark was the first one in. He worked at the facility during its final operating year. Quiet guy, kept to himself, reliable. On his last day there, he was the one who shut off the generators, walked the halls alone, turned every key, signed the closure forms. But something didn't sit right. He told a friend he heard voices in the vents, kept seeing the number 4 scratched into door frames. When he went back for his final paycheck, the reception office was empty. He never cashed that check. Mark came back 17 years later with one goal: closure, to walk the halls one last time, to prove to himself there was nothing left to fear. He said he wasn't scared, but he kept the lights on in his truck for the entire week they were filming, even when he slept. Danica found the facility through a redacted folder on a whistleblower site. She wasn't looking for ghost stories. She was chasing a paper trail, looking for inconsistencies in old federal funding linked to black site locations. She documented everything: old blueprints, security logs, budget slips. There were entries for rooms that didn't exist, staff logs with names that never worked there. And then there was the footage, the brief, unexplained security clip that surfaced, 6 seconds of hallway camera footage with no source and no metadata. The frame flickered with a white silhouette. Human, but not. That was enough for her. She contacted Mark and Luis, and she brought the cameras. Her motivation? Truth, pure and simple, but behind it, she'd lost someone. A sister gone missing 5 years earlier. The last voicemail she ever received had terrible audio, static-filled, but one word had been crystal clear: facility. Luis never spoke publicly, never posted online. In fact, 4 years, no one even knew he existed. He was listed in the original staff logs as Luis A., tech analyst. His name came up during Danika's research, buried in a memo about unauthorized access to internal drives. He left the facility without warning. No resignation letter, no final paycheck. He vanished for nearly 2 decades. Then in 2021, he emailed Danika, just 3 words: "I saw it." When they met, he wouldn't enter the building. He stood at the fence line, eyes red, nails bitten raw. He said it visited him in dreams, that it left messages in his walls, that no matter how many locks he changed, it always found a way in. He only agreed to return under one condition: the tape would be destroyed once reviewed. But that's not what happened. They were a strange team, each of them broken in their own way, united by obsession, regret, and something that should have remained buried. They weren't thrill seekers, they were witnesses, survivors. Next came the moment that changed everything. The moment the tape was played. The moment the door they thought was closed opened again. The tape was discovered inside a decaying evidence box, buried behind a false panel in the Eastern Maintenance Wing. It was unmarked, except for a single word scratched into the plastic casing with a nail or something jagged. No label, just 5 letters: recap. They found an old playback system in the facility's lower basement. It looked like it hadn't been touched since the 90s. Dust covered every inch. The screen was warped, discolored, but the VCR still worked. They powered it with a generator. Danika wired the camera feed into her laptop. Luis stood back, far back. Mark pressed play. The screen flickered once, then again. Colors bled into each other, forming shapes that shouldn't have existed. The audio started as white noise, but underneath it, something was moving. The first frame showed a room, concrete walls, a single ceiling bulb, a bed bolted to the floor, white sheets tucked too tight, a metal chair in the corner, and seated in that chair, a figure. No movement, no sound, just the faint buzz of fluorescent light. At first glance, it looked like an observation room, but the light didn't match the room's shape, cast shadows in the wrong direction. The team watched closely. 40 seconds passed. The figure remained still, no breathing, no shifting. But then, the chair's shadow moved. Not dramatically, just a twitch, subtle, barely noticeable. But it wasn't the figure. The figure didn't move. The shadow did. Danika rewound the footage, slowed it down frame by frame. The moment the shadow twitched, there was a flicker across the screen. A split second where the image doubled, then corrected itself. Luis whispered something. He didn't realize he'd said it aloud. "It sees us." At exactly 41 seconds into the tape, the figure blinked. No breathing, no head movement, just the eyes. They snapped open, locked straight into the lens. It wasn't an unconscious blink. It was deliberate. It knew it was being watched. Danica dropped her camera. Then, the footage cut out. Not a fade, not static, just black. And the sound stopped completely. But for 5 full seconds after the screen went dark, the generator continued to buzz. The lights stayed on. The tape continued to roll. Something was still recording. Something off the feed. Danica tried to eject the tape. It jammed. Mark reached for the plug, but when he touched the power cable, he recoiled, said it burned. And Luis? He had turned his back to the monitor, but was muttering again, staring at the basement wall, repeating one phrase under his breath. It's watching the wrong side. Then, the generator died. Complete blackout. The room fell into absolute silence. No hum, no static, just 3 people frozen in place. Somewhere above them, a sound began. Heavy footsteps, measured, deliberate, but not human. They left the basement in total darkness, left the tape, left the VCR running. When they made it back to the main level, the power returned on its own. No one spoke, not for hours. What they had seen on the tape wasn't archival. It wasn't old. It wasn't finished. Something had looked back, and now that it had seen them, truly seen them, it didn't want to be forgotten again. The next day, the tape was missing. What was on that footage wasn't the beginning. It was an invitation. The tape wasn't documenting an event. It was the event. And that was only the first 40 seconds. Next, what the tape showed. The hidden layers. The frames that weren't meant to be seen. The moments that played only after midnight. The day after they played the tape, everything began to shift. Not dramatically at first, just wrong. Luis described it as a feeling like something had rearranged the air. They tried to make sense of what they'd seen, catalog it, research it. The figure, the room, the building itself, anything to explain what had happened. Danica ran a face scan using government facial recognition software she had access to through a contact. The search returned 0 results, not even a close match. She then tried tracking down old patient logs from the facility. A few incomplete rosters survived the fire. Most were blacked out, but nowhere was the figure from the tape listed. It was as though the patient never existed. That night, Luis returned to his apartment, a 3rd-story walk-up on the city's west end. He tried to sleep, but the moment the lights were off, he heard it. A faint static hiss, then a tone, high, piercing, and underneath it, whispering. He searched the entire apartment, turned off every device, even cut power to the circuit box. But the sound continued. It wasn't in the walls. It wasn't in the air. It was in him. The next morning, his eyes were bloodshot. His nose had bled during the night. He hadn't even noticed. Meanwhile, Danica had isolated the clip of the figure's blink. She slowed it down, then slowed it again. What she found wasn't in the movement of the eyes, but the mouth. A nearly imperceptible twitch of the lips. Micro-movements, not random, rhythmic. She enhanced the audio. At first, nothing. Then she increased it again, filtered the background. Then she heard a voice whispering, not gone, not forgotten, just beneath. Danica called Mark. She hadn't told Luis yet. She didn't want to worry him. But Mark didn't pick up. She played the enhanced audio back again, this time on loop. She focused on the tail end of the clip, just after the voice. And she heard, something else. A second voice, lower than the first, and it overlapped perfectly. Not behind, not ahead, at the exact same time. She replayed it in mono, then stereo. Each time, the second voice remained hidden until she split the channels manually. It hadn't been an echo. It had been a message layered behind the message. There was no second person visible on the screen. Danica slowed the video down further, frame by frame. Between the frames, things that weren't there appeared. For 2 frames, just 2, the chair behind the patient had changed. It was facing the wrong way. No one had moved it. Danica paused the clip. She sat motionless, her hand trembling on the mouse. The timestamp on her screen read, 3 hours 13 minutes and 13 seconds. She hadn't noticed it before. The edit file had corrupted. Her audio filters reset, and the folder where she saved the clips was gone, replaced by a single video file, one she hadn't recorded. No name, no format, just an icon with no preview. She clicked it. The screen showed her own editing room, from a camera angle she didn't recognize. She was seated at her desk, but her reflection in the monitor wasn't moving. The monitor in the footage still displayed the paused frame of the patient. But in the reflection, its mouth moved again. And this time, the second voice didn't whisper, "We never left." Danica slammed her laptop shut. When she opened it again, the file was gone. They thought they were investigating a forgotten patient, but what they'd found was a doorway, and something had already stepped through. The unraveling had begun. By the end of the week, something had changed in Mark. He had become quiet, guarded. He didn't answer calls right away, and when he did, his voice sounded distant, like it was coming from another room. Danica had just finished uploading the footage to a secure drive when her phone rang. It was him. Then she heard Mark's recorded, shaky voice. He was outside, just standing there, not moving. I didn't even see him walk up. 1 second the street was empty, next second, he was there. Same hospital gown, but it's not a memory, it's him. Danica, he's here. And that was the last time anyone heard from Mark. Danica drove to his apartment the next morning. The front door was open. The lock hadn't been forced. His keys were on the table. Laptop still running. Shower still dripping. But no sign of Mark. Only one thing out of place. The VCR they'd used at the facility was sitting in his living room. She pulled the cassette out. It was the same one, or so she thought. But when she checked the back of the tape casing, there were 2 scratches that hadn't been there before. Deep, parallel, like something had gripped it hard. That night, Luis called her in a panic. He had tried to isolate more frames from the original footage, but something went wrong. Every time he hit play, his monitor flickered, then cut to black. When it returned, the footage had changed. It was still the patient, but this time, the chair was empty. Danica didn't believe it. She thought Luis had corrupted the file, until she checked her own copy. Her hard drive had failed, and not just failed, it had melted, warped, like it had been exposed to heat, even though the room temperature hadn't risen. No fire, no short. Luis tried again. A new setup, different location, but the same thing happened. It was as if the footage rejected being seen. Electrical failures began to follow them. The moment any equipment connected to the tape powered on, lights flickered, devices bricked, walls hummed. In one case, Luis was thrown back from his desk when his editing software crashed. Literally pushed, he said, by something cold that wasn't there. Danica went back to the original cassette. She rewound the entire tape. But when it stopped, the counter didn't land at 0. It kept moving, beyond its duration. The VCR's digital display began ticking up slowly. 59 minutes and 1 second. 1 hour 14 minutes and 38 seconds. 2 hours and 12 seconds. Hours of content, but the tape length hadn't changed. She hesitated, then pressed play. The screen showed nothing but dark corridors, like a hospital or underground tunnel. No camera movements, no source of light, just grainy black and gray footage of endless hallways. Timestamp ticking, 2 hours 14 minutes and 4 seconds. 3 hours 47 minutes and 29 seconds. The tape was still recording, but there was no camera. Somewhere, the feed was coming from a place that didn't exist anymore, or one that was never meant to. The last thing the screen showed before it cut to black was a room, not the patient's. This one had no furniture, only a wall covered in plastic sheeting, and something written in red marker, shaking slightly as if breathing behind the curtain. Danica stepped closer to the screen. The writing came into focus. For words, "You're still being watched." She ejected the cassette. Luis never returned her next call, and by the time she drove to his building, someone else had already removed his things. His apartment had been cleared out overnight. His name wasn't on the lease anymore. They had opened a channel they couldn't close, and whatever was on the other end had started moving freely. Danica didn't sleep for 2 days. Not after what she saw on the hallway footage. Not after Luis disappeared. Not after the VCR clicked itself on, with no tape inside. She had transferred the footage to a closed-circuit display in her apartment. No internet, no Wi-Fi, no outside contact. The theory was simple: control the environment, limit the effect. But that night, that theory collapsed. It started playing by itself. No remote, no prompt. The monitor came to life. The screen was black at first, then grain, then shapes. She squinted, confused at what looked like a familiar room. A desk, a fan, a small plant in the corner. And then she understood. The footage was of her own apartment. Real time, her at her desk, watching the screen, watching herself watching the screen. There were no cameras pointed at her, none installed, yet the image was flawless. It wasn't a reflection, it wasn't a feed, it was a perspective, one that wasn't hers. Her phone buzzed. It was Luis. The call connected before she even touched it. "Danica, don't say anything. Do you hear that?" She listened, but it wasn't coming from her phone. The voice she heard was his, but a second delayed, repeating everything. "Do you hear that?" The echo didn't sync with the audio. It didn't belong to the phone. It was coming from the video, from the screen. Luis's voice was inside the footage before he'd even spoken. And worse, her own head moved before she moved it. The tape was anticipating her, recording her, before she acted. It wasn't surveillance, it was intent. She disconnected the VCR, yanked the plug, removed the monitor. The image persisted for 6 more seconds after the power was cut. She ran a diagnostic on the tape, an old tool from her editing suite. It read the metadata, no listed format, no codec, no timestamp, no source device. The tape had no beginning and no end. She pressed rewind, but the video didn't rewind. It kept playing. More images, different rooms, sometimes hers, sometimes not. Once, it showed a child's room, walls pale blue, mobile hanging above the crib, empty, quiet. Then it cut to a subway car, flickering, seats wet, no people. Then to what looked like a crawl space from the inside. Each image lasted seconds, but each was impossibly clear. Too clear, as if someone, or something, had recorded a memory that didn't belong to them. Then a voice, soft, monotone, not quite human. It spoke again. Not gone, not forgotten, just beneath. It appears to be the same phrase from before, but this time, another voice, layered beneath it, lower, as if under the floor. She realized then, the tape wasn't playing anything at all. It was remembering, and remembering required watching. Every time she hit play, the tape observed her back. Every second of attention fed it. The footage changed again. Her apartment, now empty. Night, no lights. But there, in the corner, something moved. A slow stretch, like joints resetting. A silhouette stepped into frame. No face, just the outline of a figure. Blurred, hunched. A dry crack, like bone shifting under pressure. It walked out of frame, toward the lens. But there was no camera, only her. And then, without touching a thing, the screen turned itself off. Danica packed the tape into a fireproof case. She drove 2 hours into the desert, dug a hole 4 feet deep, drenched the tape in lighter fluid. She watched it burn, watched the casing melt, the ribbon curl and split into choking black smoke. She waited until nothing but ash remained. Then she left satisfied. But when she returned to her apartment, it was there again, on her shelf. Same tape, same label, unmarked, unburned. She didn't touch it, didn't even look directly at it. But her phone screen glitched the moment she entered the room. Later, while reviewing documentary footage from her handheld camera, footage she hadn't recorded, she found something strange. Faint whispers layered beneath the ambient sound. She rewound the file, played it again. Still there. This time, the words were clearer. A voice, her own voice, speaking sentences she hadn't spoken yet. She tried recording outside. Different camera, no audio equipment, no microphone. Still, the whispering returned. Each new file was corrupted, but only the sound, and only when she was in the frame. She unplugged every recording device, shut off her phone, covered mirrors, blacked out her windows. That's when Luis came back. She hadn't heard from him in days, maybe longer. Time had started to bend or stutter. He looked the same, but his voice didn't track. Luis speaks up. Danica, it's not the tape. It's never been the tape. His mouth moved, then the words came, half a second late, the way video buffering lags behind real time. But worse, his shadow didn't follow him. It moved like it was thinking, like it was choosing. It paused. Even when he kept walking, he sat down, looked directly at her, and said the words she dreaded. There's no tape anymore. It's part of the signal now. Every time we play it, every time we even remember it, it watches us back. Danica asked him where he'd been. He smiled, or something tried to make him smile. The muscles moved, but the eyes didn't. The eyes looked terrified. Don't record me, please. It likes the shape of your voice. And then his nose began to bleed. Not a drip, a stream. Thick, slow, silent. Danica backed away, but her phone, powered off, face down, lit up with a new notification. No sender, no file name, just a timestamp that reads, "Live feed midnight." She didn't open it, didn't need to. It was counting from a moment that hadn't happened yet. The tape wasn't dead. It was waiting. The footage you're about to see was never meant to exist. It was found on an unmarked SD card, left on the editing table of Danika's apartment. There was no return address, no metadata. The date on the file simply read, "Null." Danika speaks with a shallow breath. "If you're seeing this, something has already gone wrong. I don't know where Mark is. And Luis? He isn't Luis anymore. It's not just a tape. It never was. It learns. It mimics. The recordings, they evolve. It records thoughts, possibilities, people who haven't happened yet. I tried to destroy every copy. I tried to cut the signal. But if you think you've been safe because you're just watching, because it's just a screen, then you don't understand how this works. It doesn't need film anymore. It needs attention. That's how it survives." That was the last message she recorded. Less than 12 hours later, her apartment was found abandoned. No signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. But her voice kept appearing. No one who's handled the tape has been found. But the footage keeps appearing. Only this time, it's not the patient we saw before. It's Danika, strapped down, motionless. But her eyes, they're open. And you're watching it now. That's how it starts. They've tried to bury it. Not just the footage, but the memory of it. Yet it keeps surfacing in broken files, in old broadcast signals, in the noise between frequencies. Always fractured, always incomplete, but never gone. If you've seen it now, then it knows you. It doesn't need the original tape anymore. It became the medium. And now that it's here, it doesn't go away. The footage continues to circulate, fragmented, corrupted, but alive. And if you've watched this far, you've already seen too much. Hi, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you to all my listeners. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to enjoy more stories. And be sure to drop your comments. I'll be looking forward to reading them. See you soon, and thanks for watching.